Journey to Becoming podcast is all about the changes, transitions, and transformations we encounter on our journey to aligning with purpose and living life with intentionality, fulfillment, and impact. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and my mission is to help those starting their entrepreneurial journeys or simply shifting gears to better align with purpose by sharing the journeys of others, offering practical tips and strategies, and providing encouragement to help you pull through whatever obstacle is standing in your way. So I invite you to sit back, relax, and join me on this journey of discovery. Joining us on the Journey to Becoming podcast today is Sandy Rodriguez. Sandy is a communications expert and author of Choose to Prevail. She is also a former editorial coordinator for the Mexican newspaper Reforma, one of the most influential publications in Latin America. Since then, Sandy has made a huge career shift and works as a certified court interpreter in Los Angeles, and she is also a fitness enthusiast, artist, and amateur winemaker. Welcome to the show, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Sabine. It's a real honor to be here. I'm a big fan of your work, so thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we're excited to learn a little bit more about you, your background, your journey from, being in Mexico to being here in LA and completely shifting gears in your life and career.
Well, let me tell you, I know that you as an author and as a coach often talk about the importance of finding a situation that aligns with your purpose, something that is really giving you a chance to move forward toward a mission. In my case, it was a situation where I hadn't even considered that back when I was in Mexico and back when I was working for the newspaper. And the reason I hadn't given much thought to a mission or a goal or anything about that is that I was just too busy. Now, let me explain. When you work in media, and I'm sure you know, but most specifically when it's for newspapers or any kind of media that requires immediacy, you can imagine that there really is no downtime ever. For instance, in reality, you would be working 14, 15, 16-hour day or beyond. And whenever you had like maybe a lunch hour or, a lunch 20 minutes, that might be more accurate, or maybe when you're home and it might be like in the wee hours, but you're home. Still, even in those moments, if something should happen, like maybe the death of a very important celebrity or like some kind of a natural disaster or just some kind of breaking news, even though it's your maybe like 2 minutes a day that you had like a moment to yourself, well then if something important should happen, when you would have to go back to the newsroom or at least figure out what you were going to do about that or how you were going to address that event. So you can imagine that it's something that's all consuming. Now, I really loved that line of work. I cannot imagine being more passionate about a career. I loved it in pretty much every aspect. I enjoyed the excitement and the adrenaline and even the stress that's involved in that kind of a line of work. However, Sabine, after many years doing that, because I did work in that field for maybe 15 or 16 years, I came to the conclusion that this had been truly all-consuming, and I was doing this at the exclusion of everything else. So on the one hand, it offered me a lot of financial stability. I was making great money. It offered me a lot of prestige. It offered me a chance to be influential, deeply influential. It was just fascinating, in line with things that I like to do, in line with skills that I have. So by all accounts, people would think, well, that is totally in alignment with her. I mean, why would she even consider moving away from that? And the reason I made that decision was because although this was extremely fulfilling on a professional level, it left no space for anything else. And during the time that I was at the newspaper, I lost my father. He died unexpectedly and at a young age, so that was very, very shocking to me. Then the exact same thing happened with my younger brother, which was even more horrifying. And I mean, it shook me to the core, certainly. And I also had other situations. For example, I had long dreamed of becoming a mom, and I did. But certainly my son's care there really was no other option. It had to be outsourced to maybe nannies, sitters, wonderful family members that have always been tremendously supportive in many ways. But the thing is that I really didn't have time for anything beyond my job. And I'm really talking about the big things, the need to be with, family, friends, loved ones. But even the small things fell to the wayside. For example, even things as silly as, say, getting a haircut. If I wanted a haircut, maybe I would have to bring out scissors and trim my own ends or things of that nature. And maybe even at my desk almost, because there was really no time for anything. So absolutely everything was on hold. Now, on the one hand, this was not ideal. On the other hand, because I just liked it so much, moving away from that proved to be a challenge. It really took a lot of planning and a lot of soul searching. But I eventually made that decision. And I decided to move from Mexico City specifically to Los Angeles specifically for a number of reasons.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. There's so much that I want to unpack there. It sounds like you went from all consuming, career is my everything, like I live and I breathe for this, and I come second and everybody else comes after that. What were the catalysts? I know you mentioned the loss of your father and your brother, and my sincere condolences for that. Was that the catalyst to make you say, hey, wait a minute, something needs to change here? Or was there another catalyst that occurred during that time that you realized, okay, I'm not putting me first and I am so consumed in work, like this is not going to be sustainable?
I think that those were definitely the main triggers, absolutely. But it did lead me to a deeper reflection. And I saw situations such as this. My very best friends who were also down similar career paths, and we would get together only a handful of times a year. And these were my closest friends. So that's something that's not normal. And again, seeing my little son personally, maybe when he's asleep, for 2 seconds before I'm just so exhausted that I fall asleep myself. That's also not ideal. These are situations that you do need to assess. Certainly, I think I was fantastically lucky in actually having a career that I loved. I know that is not something that everybody can say, but it really was something that I was doing to the exclusion of absolutely everything else. Now, I do think that everything has not just one silver lining, but many. And the fact that I was seriously, entirely consumed by that had a very surprising upside, Sabine. I've been reading that people that work in situations where they wear uniforms, for example, or people that work in conditions where they cannot really see the passage of time, maybe because there are no windows and it's not very clear to them if it's nighttime, daytime, summer, spring, or fall. Those people tend to not age. I know that sounds very bizarre, but because maybe there are no markers saying, okay, so now I'm changing my wardrobe, means I'm getting older. It means if you're wearing a uniform every single day, that was not my case, but that was the case in the study I read. You don't really get that time is passing you by. So I do believe that I was in a holding pattern, but also kind of in a dormant state for that decade and a half. And I do honestly feel that I believe I might look a good 15 years younger than I am. And I certainly feel a good 15 years younger than I am, because that was a period of time that I had really no, let's say, contact with the outside world, to put it that way. So I think that's interesting because, for example, I see some people my age are jaded about different situations, maybe relationships, maybe life itself, the workplace, different situations, maybe because they've had bad experiences or many bad experiences. In my case, I don't have any bad experiences. I don't have any good experiences either. But by virtue of not having many experiences in pretty much any other field beyond that, I have a very youthful outlook on these things. So, I mean, I know it's very strange. It might sound like, okay, she sounds very naive. No, I don't think so, but I do feel like I don't have that degree of jadedness that sometimes comes from just living more, no, being on this planet for more years.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I love the way that you were able to reframe that experience, right? So while on one side, one can look at it and be like, oh, well, you lost out on so much in terms of experiences and people and all that other stuff. You're seeing it that, yes, I did. But at the same time, like, because I didn't have those experiences, I'm now at a place where like, this is all new to me. I'm excited about it. And I don't have that chip on my shoulder, if you will, or that jaded feeling around what it means to, be exploring life. So I love that reframe for sure. One thing that I wanted to ask too, that you mentioned that, it was a lot of soul searching and some deep looking at yourself and what it is that you want. So during that time, like what shifts did you start to make, or if any, in your mindset? Like once you started to see the reality of the life that you were living, what were some of the initial shifts that you started to make so that you could actually change your life?
Well, here's the thing. I'm not at all a spontaneous person. I wouldn't say that it's in my nature to just go around doing like random things. However, this was probably the most spontaneous thing I have ever been in. It was a big thing because I was going to move into an uncharted career path in a new country, no less, with a young child, all by myself, to a place where I had basically maybe just a handful of friends, no family members. So it was just like a very strange thing for a person that is normally known to be very steadfast to decide to do. But it was a decision that I had definitely made, like you said, after soul searching. So what I did was that I went about this in a rather strategic way. So it was spontaneous, but it was also strategic. So what I started doing is that I made a list of everything that would need to take place before I could actually move. And that included things as basic as getting my paperwork in order, trying to decide where I was going to live once I moved to LA, etc. So what I did was that I started, even before giving anybody much notice, I started coming here every so often, here to LA, maybe once a month or maybe once every 3 weeks, just to sort little things out, minor things, maybe opening up a bank account, maybe getting a driver's license, that kind of thing. And then once everything was, let's say, ready, when my ducks were all in a row, I told my employer that this was my intention and that I wanted to be here as soon as possible. Now, I do think that it's very important to not burn bridges. And this is something that I would recommend to anybody exploring a career shift. I would say that it's important to give your employer as much notice as possible and comply to whatever requests they might have. Like, for instance, in my case, I was asked to stay on for a couple more months. And I was happy to do so. I mean, of course, again, I did really love my job, my employer, my company, my coworkers. So I was very happy to do that. And that's important. I think that sometimes people might get ahead of themselves and think, okay, I'm done with this job. I'm just going to storm in there and quit. And while that seems exciting and it sounds very cinematic, the reality is that that is not the best course of action, just assuming that it can be done and doing it.
Really appreciate you tuning into this week's episode of the Journey to Becoming podcast. Taking a quick break to extend an invitation to my Facebook group, The Tribe of Courageous Leaders. The group exists to support ambitious, impact-driven leaders in their development, both personally and professionally. As a member of the free group, you'll have access to weekly live trainings on topics ranging from mindset, time management, productivity, leadership, to money management, and business strategy. The group is tailored for those who love to learn and want to do so with other like-minded professionals. So again, I invite you to head on over to sabinegideon.com/tribe to claim your spot. And be sure to catch the weekly live trainings on Wednesdays. Dates and times are shared and updated within the group, so be sure to join. I look forward to welcoming you to the community and have included the link to the tribe right down below in the show notes. Now, back to the show. So a couple nuggets from what you shared is really around one, being thoughtful and planning, right? So you didn't just like wake up and say, all right, I'm moving to LA, right? You took your time, you did some planning, you really identified, well, what makes sense for me at this time, and made sure that you left on a good note.
Completely, Sabine. So much so that I went the extra mile and I subscribed to an LA-based magazine while I was still living in Mexico City. And as I read it, I tried to feel myself as a local in LA, thinking, oh, I'm reading my neighborhood magazine. So it was like kind of like tricking myself into feeling as if it was already a done deal. And I think that was also instrumental in pushing me forward in that regard. However, I don't want your listeners to think that it was like extremely seamless, because there were hurdles along the way. Even with the most careful planning, there were a couple of things that full disclosure did happen. I sold this very tiny condo that I owned in Mexico in order to be able to weather an initial period of unemployment, because obviously that's what was going to happen. I was not going to, walk off the plane and into a new office. That was obviously not the case. But, even let me tell you, that type of, no matter how many savings you may have, they run out unless you have a source of income. So even though I did have that safety net, it's not a permanent safety net. I was mentioning that during recent years, I had written a book. I wrote that last year, actually. And that kind of turned into a small business in a very strange way. I didn't set out to write this book to create an empire or make it like a springboard onto a different kind of career path or anything like that. It wasn't, making money off of the book was not really front and center when I was writing the book. So much so that although I am a professional editor and I'm very well connected in publishing, I didn't want to even explore a traditional publishing route, because I wanted to do something that was fun for me and that I thought would be helpful regardless of whether it's sold or not. It doesn't really follow the tenets of most best-selling books. But let me tell you, it ended up being popular enough to, I suddenly went on Amazon and I found over 100 reviews, and I was like, oh, that's very interesting. So people are liking it. So then I decided to, grow this in a bit of a different direction. I'm now working with a company called Heart of Hollywood to create a video series inspired by the book. So that's also something that we're working on. And I'm doing a lot of things that are related to the book that ended up being quite similar to what any small business owner would do. So it actually ended up being like a small business venture that I kind of fell into. And it's very exciting. It's very interesting. I like marketing. I like doing PR. I like doing a number of things of this nature. And having written that book has kind of enabled me to get a little bit more into that. And it's been a fascinating journey for sure.
Awesome. So in terms of today, right, what tools do you use or do you leverage on a day-to-day to help you maintain this healthy mindset, to help you maintain this balance? You talked about, now you're in a situation where at 6:00, the world is yours, right? You get to decide what you want, but how are you managing your mindset and just your day so that you do leave at 6 and do what you want versus picking up work or thinking about work?
Well, let me tell you, I'm extremely fortunate, and if any of your listeners are fully bilingual or trilingual, I would really encourage them to look into interpreting, or specifically court interpreting as a line of work, because even if it is a full-time job, or even if you are an in-house interpreter in a courthouse like I am, there's something very magical about that line of work, and it's this. I don't think there is any other type of work except maybe something like being a sports announcer, where you do the thing in real time and that's it. There is nothing else to do. There is nothing else that you need to take home. There is nothing else that you can pre-plan. You don't plan for it because you have no idea what it's going to be like. And you don't think about it afterwards because you're done. You're helping out whoever needs your help in real time. You're doing it in the now. It occupies your mind fully for a very specific and very limited period of time, and then it's done and then it's over. So it's never going to be a situation like, for instance, in journalism where you're never really off the clock because you need to be aware of what is going on in the world, or in pretty much any other line of work. In interpreting, that is not the case. So that's very helpful in that regard. And as to when I get home, I do sometimes agree to work on other types of freelance projects. For example, I'm often asked to write articles for magazines or to host video segments for different companies. But the reality is that I only do that now when it's interesting to me or when I want to. So it's more like a hobby than something that is, like in the past, all-consuming. So that's interesting, and it still leaves me time to paint, to do the winemaking thing.
Fair. So do you have any daily rituals that you practice, whether it be around self-care or mindfulness, either at the beginning of your day, middle, end of the day?
I think there's something that goes not so much like a ritual, but more like an overarching mindset, which is to think that everything that happens to us throughout our day could well be part of a bridge of incidents or a series of events that might be leading us to something wonderful. I think that often we find people that get very concerned, for example, about being stuck in traffic, but they don't know that maybe being stuck in traffic kept them from being in some kind of a car crash, for example, that they might have been had they been speeding. Or sometimes, situations that do not appear to be good can actually end up being very, very good and leading to a positive outcome. So that's one of the mindsets that I try to keep throughout the day. And the other one is this, and I don't need to get very dark and dramatic, but the reality is that there is a lot of benefit to realizing and understanding that life can be lost at any point in time. In my case, for example, I've been a crime victim and I could have potentially lost my life like in a second. And certainly that's true of everyone, regardless of whether they've been in a situation like that or not. The reality is that you never know. I mean, sometimes people that are the picture of health, they might develop a disease or something might happen. I mean, you never know. It's hard to say. But I don't like to think about that in a sad and deep and dark and terrible way, but more as a reason to enjoy and relish every single thing that happens over the course of a day. You never know when things are going to come to an end. So it's very important to really treat people with kindness as if it were the last time you were going to see them. Enjoy, like if you're out at your favorite restaurant, enjoy the meal to the fullest extent that you can. When you're out and about, really live life to the fullest. And
so that's a really great point of, relishing and being mindful of the fact that life is short and at any given moment, any circumstance that occurs, we can be here today and gone tomorrow. And if 2020 has taught us anything, it is that life is short and that the experiences that we are given are what matters. It's not the stuff, it's not the careers, it's not the, material things, but it's life itself, the people, the relationships. Now that you're here, now that you're settled in your career, all of these things are happening and opportunities are opening up for you with regards to your book. What are some of the experiences that you are relishing at this point in stage of life?
Well, one thing that I did that was very interesting is that I developed a totally new hobby in recent years. I started to make wine, not commercially, just for the fun of it. And I would also encourage anybody that likes drinking wine to consider making wine. It can be as serious or as playful as you want this to be. I'm in California, but people can make wine pretty much no matter where they are because grapes can easily be sent over to them no matter where they live. It's a very fascinating hobby. I've made very, very good wine. In fact, I received a bronze medal for a Zinfandel that I made out of grapes from the Paso Robles region. But I also sometimes like making wine in my kitchen from a kit in the most playful of ways. I even experiment with things that I guess a serious winemaker would not even consider wine. I made like wine, quote unquote wine, using cherry juice instead of grape, or cranberry juice instead of grape, or even apple juice instead of grape. And these are very interesting experiments. So it's just fun. I mean, it's something that's very creative as well. I think that you can be as creative with winemaking as you could potentially be with, say, cooking or baking or painting or music. It's just a different creative outlet. So I think that that's something that I never would have considered back in the day, because firstly, I wouldn't have had the free time. And secondly, it's just such a random thing that I don't think it would even have popped into my mind to do that. But it's very fun. And the winemaking community is very welcoming, be they like serious winemakers that you might meet at events or tastings, or the casual, fun winemaker that might be on an online forum. They're all very, very welcoming and very kind in sharing their experiences.
That's awesome. So we're going to wrap up, but before we wrap up, I have a couple more important questions for you. Looking back over your life, over your journey up until this point, if you had the opportunity to go back to the younger version of Sandy and give her a piece of advice, what would you share with her?
Well, I used to be tremendously self-conscious. And my advice now that I've seen more about what the world is that nobody's paying as much attention to our flaws as we ourselves are. So there's really no reason to be as self-conscious. And secondly, if there is something about oneself that is a little bit weird or a little bit different, that's not a liability, that's an asset. That is what makes you memorable, and that eventually can even be what makes you more loved.
There's a lot in there. It's self-acceptance, right? It's recognizing that you are being more critical about yourself than anyone else around you is. If everyone is being critical about themselves, then that gives that room and that grace to admit or accept that how you are is perfectly fine. I love that. So I know we talked a little bit about your book, Choose to Prevail. So share with the audience, where can they find the book? What other resources or projects do you have going on that you'd like to share?
Oh, thank you so much, Sabine. So my book, Choose to Prevail by Sandy Rodriguez, is available, of course, on Amazon, but it's also available through any other major online platform, such as barnesandnoble.com or walmart.com or target.com. It's available pretty much everywhere. I even saw it in eBay Australia, so there should be a way to get it. That's one thing. The other thing is that if anybody cares to connect on social media, well, they can go to Instagram at Choose to Prevail. Or if they're interested in checking out the video series, I will be sharing updates about that on Instagram and also in a Facebook group also called Choose to Prevail. And this series is set to be streamed later this year on a brand new streaming platform called Heart of Hollywood Cinema. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you heard Sandy. Be sure to grab the book, Choose to Prevail by Sandy Rodriguez. It's on Amazon, Target, Walmart. She is everywhere. So go ahead and grab the book, search, and definitely connect with her on Instagram. Same handle, Choose to Prevail. So I'm excited to see how things continue to prevail for you in your life. So now that we're wrapping up, any final thoughts or something that you want to leave or share with the audience?
Just one little thing, an exercise that they might want to try. I think that it would be very helpful for everyone to write down experiences that they have had that did not seem that they were favorable in the moment, but that actually led them to something better. Once you see a couple of those written down, you really internalize the fact that that does tend to happen, and it just makes your mindset that much sturdier.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing that for sure. So that's all that we have today. Again, be sure to check out Sandy on Instagram at Choose to Prevail. Check out the book, Choose to Prevail by Sandy Rodriguez. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. I hope you were able to grab a few nuggets and some action items that you can begin implementing this week. I'll be back next week with some more actionable tips to help you along your journey of transition, change, and transformation. In the meantime, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment on the platform of your choosing. And if you really enjoyed this content, go ahead and share it with your network. Share it with a friend, a family member, whoever it is you know that might benefit from the information that was shared today. Until next time, have a wonderful and purposeful week.